Trains magazine is the most widely read railroad magazine in the world. But more than that, what we try to do is make Trains the best general interest railroad magazine that anyone can find. Best writing, best photography, a look at the past, a look at railroad history, but also lots of information on current events, railroad news, that sort of thing. Why Trains on Location? Well, a big part of what's in the magazine is our reporting and our photography on railroad operations, mainly freight operations, but also passenger trains, commuter lines, that sort of thing. It's been a mainstay in the magazine for decades, and we thought with the video what we could really do is bring that whole railroad operations thing to life through the medium of the video.
What I like about shooting these shows is that I love trains. I've been shooting trains pretty much all my life, ever since I could first hold a camera, and it's just one of my favorite things to do. When we shoot these programs, we do a lot more than just go trackside and drop the camera next to the tracks and hit the record button. Trains prides itself on excellent photography. It's very important to them, and I like to bring the same quality to the videos. For most rail fans, one of the most interesting things about railroading is what's up front, the locomotives. And I'm certainly one of them. I'm a huge diesel fan. And in each one of our Train on Location shows, we try and devote a section of the show to the rolling stock, to the locomotives.
One of the things we think sets our On Location series apart is the way in which we try to tell a story in each tape. And there's a beginning and there's an end, and there's lots of little stories within the main story as we try to tell people what's wonderful about the places we go, the trains we see, the railroaders we talk to, and really make it an experience that's fulfilling in the way that only a great documentary can do.
We go out into the field with our fingers crossed, armed with as much information as we can, and spend about anywhere from 8 to 12 days in the location and shoot as much as we can. We know that we want to cover this piece of railroad, and I have sort of a concept in my head going out there what we want the show to be. But the shows often take left turns, and it ends up being something really different and really surprising.
I think Kevin brings credibility to the show. Unlike having a standard voice talent in the show, it brings a more personal element to it. He's the editor, he's sort of the man behind the scenes, and I think the viewer probably is able to relate to him a little bit better because he has a better understanding of trains and what's going on, as opposed to somebody who's just reading the script.
East of here, the railroad has a personality of switch runs, transfer runs, freight classification, but west of here, that's where the high-speed action really begins.
It's fun. It's a lot of fun. It's whoever thought of, cutting these huge, massive, sometimes gorgeous trains to, either rock or classical or, different styles of music.
A big part of each program are the animated maps we use, which are created by Julie Mainwood. In all our shows, we cover anywhere from 30 to 200 miles of railroad, and these maps are used throughout the program so viewers always know where they are. The tapes have attracted a lot of attention. Certainly they've been well received in the railfan community, but we've also won 5 Telly Awards. The Telly series is a series of awards in the non-broadcast specialty video field. And we're very proud of the fact that 5 of our tapes have been given Tellys. One of our Telly Award winners was our tape on Sand Patch, the CSX crossing of the Alleghenies in Maryland and south central Pennsylvania. And I think one of the reasons we won the Telly Award there was because we had a nice way of blending together historical black and white photographs, interviews with some people like historian John Hankey, who told us a lot about the area. We visited the Manse Training Camp, which is an informal gathering place for rail fans in the area. We talked with an operator in one of the CSX interlocking towers on the line. Weaving all these elements together really told a story, and I think that's what made the difference in the awards. As executive producer of this series, one of the fun things is to get together with the train staff and watch a new show. And To be honest with you, we really get a kick out of it. We hope viewers do too. Hi, I'm Kevin Keefe, editor of Trains Magazine, and welcome to Showdown on Lake Erie, the latest in our on-location video documentary series about great train watching spots around North America. In this program, we'll see Conrail in its last days, battling it out with Norfolk Southern on the southern shore of Lake Erie between Buffalo and Cleveland. We'll take you to such popular train watching spots as Northeast Pennsylvania, Silver Creek, New York, and Conneaut, Ohio. And we'll also go for a tour inside General Electric's locomotive plant in Erie, Pennsylvania. And watch for more in our on-location series, direct from the pages of Trains Magazine. And now, Showdown on Lake Erie. According to conventional wisdom, the three most important things to a restaurant's success are location, location, and location. For rail fans, the Puffer Belly restaurant in Berea, Ohio has an ideal location. Housed in what was once a railroad depot, the upscale eatery sits next to Conrail's Indianapolis line, the former Big Four route to its namesake city and St. Louis. The Puffer Belly's parking lot serves up what may be the best train watching in the Cleveland area. The paved lot faces Berea Interlocking, the focal point of a giant figure X where the Indianapolis line crosses and connects with Conrail's Chicago line. Known locally as the Lakefront Line, the busy Chicago line funnels traffic between Chicago and Selkirk Yard near Albany, New York. Granted, the Berea Interlocking Tower is no longer used, closed by Conrail on February 1, 1998, but that has not diminished the appeal of the Puffer Belly as a great place for rail fans to devour the action at Berea. It's not often you find great train watching and great food at a single location, but the view from the Puffer Belly's parking lot is just an appetizer. A few miles east of Berea, the Chicago line comes within a stone's throw of Norfolk Southern's Cleveland District route to Buffalo. If Berea is the appetizer, then what follows is surely the main course, a dish we like to call Showdown on Lake Erie. The names of the players have changed over the years, but the game remains the same, moving trains over 175 miles across Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York. Both routes head east from Cleveland to the Lake Erie port of Ashtabula, Ohio, where Conrail's east-west Chicago line crosses the north-south Youngstown line. From Ashtabula, trains continue east to Conneaut, where both railroads sail across the main line of the Bessemer and Lake Erie on a bridge. After crossing the Ohio-Pennsylvania state line, NS heads for its interchange with the B&LE at Wallace Junction near Girard. By Fairview, NS is again within a stone's throw of the Chicago line. The two parallel each other to Erie, Pennsylvania, site of General Electric Transportation System's locomotive plant. 14 miles east of Erie, the rivals sprint through northeast Pennsylvania. The battle crosses the state line into New York through Ripley and Dunkirk before converging on Silver Creek, a popular train-watching spot. The two routes finally peel away from each other at Blaisdell, a western suburb of Buffalo. Two Buffalo area short lines mark the eastern limits of our story, the South Buffalo and the Buffalo Southern. When it comes to the history of Conrail and Norfolk Southern between Buffalo and Cleveland, the Big Four line of Berea is only the tip of the iceberg. Officially the Consolidated Rail Corporation, Conrail was a privately owned company established by Congress in 1975 to reorganize and consolidate 6 bankrupt northeastern railroads. One of those components was Penn Central, the unhappy alliance of the Pennsylvania Railroad and arch-rival New York Central. You wouldn't know it from this 1960-era photo, but the railroad's operations in Cleveland date back to the 14th of March, 1836, when the Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati Railroad was chartered. Construction began in 1847, and 2 years later the first train pulled wooden flat cars into the city along River Street at 6 miles per hour. Beginning in 1862, the CCC bought a number of lines, which by 1882 gave the system a through line between Cleveland, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, and St. Louis, the so-called Big Four. New York Central's Western Territory connection was the Lake Shore and Michigan Southern, incorporated in 1869. 4 years later, the Lake Shore came under the control of the New York Central and Hudson River, creating a through line from Chicago to New York along the lower Great Lakes. Like the Lake Shore and the New York Central before it, Conrail vanished into railroad history a few weeks after we shot this program. Like two people splitting a wishbone at Thanksgiving dinner, Norfolk Southern and CSX divided the 12,700-mile railroad on June 1, 1999. Conrail survives as a terminal switching road in New Jersey and Detroit, Michigan. The David to Conrail's Goliath between Cleveland and Buffalo is Roanoke, Virginia-based Norfolk Southern, the result of a 1982 merger between the Southern Railway and the Norfolk and Western. Southern Railway of recent decades was a well-run, profitable railroad extending from Washington, D.C. and Cincinnati to the Deep South, as well as west to Memphis and St. Louis. Norfolk and Western was the consummate coal hauler until it acquired a handful of Midwestern railroads in 1964. Key to our story was the New York, Chicago, and St. Louis Railroad, known as the Nickel Plate. Built between 1881 and 1882, it was conceived as a spite railroad between Buffalo and Chicago to compete with the New York Central. Despite an early policy of neglect, the Nickel Plate developed a reputation for moving perishable commodities fast. It was built between Cleveland and Buffalo along level land near the lake, parallel and to the south of the LS and MS. It was often within spitting distance of its rival, surely a temptation for the owners of the Lake Shore. Although little if any nickel plate rolling stock remains on NS in 1999, you can still see relics from the railroad. A dramatic case in point, this former nickel plate cantilever signal bridge at Ripley, Pennsylvania. In 1798, Nathaniel Doane settled what became Doane's Corners. 2 years later, the population of the future Cleveland totaled 7 people. The city's come a long way since then. Today, Cleveland boasts a population of 500,000. Even more visible is the downtown skyline, the result of $3.5 billion in investments in recent years. Not bad for a city that didn't get its first doctor until 1810. With the breakup of Conrail, change has come to Cleveland's railroads as well. CSX gets everything east of this location, known as CP 181. The new trackage constitutes part of the railroad's gateway route to Boston, Albany, and New Jersey. NS gets the lakefront line from here to Berea, as well as the Chicago line to Chicago. This constitutes the western half of Norfolk Southern's new Penn route. An eastbound road railer train reveals why this nondescript location serves as the dividing line between CSX and NS. The train heads east on Conrail's Cleveland line to Pittsburgh. NS will take this route to Pittsburgh, where it will connect with Conrail's former Pennsylvania Railroad main line to Harrisburg, Washington, and other destinations in the Northeast. It's not hard finding CP 181. Just look for the new Cleveland Browns football stadium along the lakefront. Here you can stand on a pedestrian bridge and ponder the stadium's heating system, which will keep the natural turf from freezing and extend the growing season. Or you can join us as we enjoy a flurry of freights that will change from Conrail to CSX in a matter of weeks. A mile or so west of here is the Cuyahoga River, which divides the east and west sides of Cleveland. The river mouth was widened beginning in 1898, and 38 years later the river was widened and the channel deepened so 600-foot freighters could navigate safely. The challenge of getting across the river brought the construction of many bridges over the years, not the least of which is this Conrail lift bridge at CP 182. With Conrail's neck on the chopping block at CP 181, this will be an NS bridge. It was a good enough reason to catch the action on the east side of the bridge, including the movement of the bridge itself. We're still not sure how we feel about trading Conrail Blue for NS Black, but a spot under an overhead street bridge gave us a chance to sort through our emotions. As a parade of freights rolled west out of Cleveland, we couldn't help but compare them to New York Central's famed Great Steel fleet of passenger trains. To quote singer Joni Mitchell, "Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone." If you thought our vantage point from under a highway overpass was less exciting than a view of Cajon Pass in Southern California, you'll want to fast forward through our visit to Cleveland's Flats. Here, the Cuyahoga River pursues a sinuous course through a valley about 1/2 mile wide. After it was abandoned by Cleveland's earliest settlers, the flats gave way to commerce and industry. Beginning in the 1850s, the railroads found the broad expanse of the flats advantageous in the storage and handling of freight. The flats have long been linked with Cleveland's steel industry. The big kid on the block is LTV Corporation. Where there's steel, there are railroads. In the flats, the primary Class I railroad is Norfolk Southern. Four-motor EMD diesels power NS switch jobs out of Campbell Yard, a former Wheeling and Lake Erie facility in the shadows of the mills. During our visit, Conrail showed up with a transfer run to the NS. Forget yard engines or four-motor units, though. The Conrail train was heavy enough to warrant 6-motor road units. Settled in 1801 by New Englanders, Ashtabula sits on Lake Erie at the mouth of the Ashtabula River. A port of entry on the St. Lawrence Seaway, Ashtabula receives large amounts of iron ore bound for Pittsburgh. The port handled some 9,522,000 tons in 1996, much of it hauled in look-alike Conrail ore cars. Like everything associated with steel in the Midwest, the trains draw 6-axle, high-horsepower locomotives like this Comfort Cab GE-8. Conrail's ore traffic moves north to south on the Youngstown line, a former central route. Although tourism is a developing industry here, we doubt if vacationers head for the same spot we did, the diamond crossing of the Youngstown and Chicago lines. We don't normally associate helpers with Midwestern railroading, but heavy trains headed south on the Youngstown line often rate pushers, such as this pair of older EMDs smoking up a storm. East-west traffic on the Chicago line's another story, though, and it's definitely a fast read. A block or so east of the crossing is the Lakeshore's Ashtabula Station. Built in 1901, it survives as a storage building for Conrail. Like the ghost of the old New York Central, a metal owl stands guard on the roof. When you're through watching trains at the old depot, you can cross the street and eat at Lyon's Stop and Cop. Then again, there's the Doxy Deli near the lakefront. A regional magazine claims it serves the best corned beef sandwich in Ohio. Settled in 1799, the city of Conneaut boasts a population of around 14,000 people, and like nearby Ashtabula, it's a port of entry for iron ore. Conneaut's home to one of the tidiest railroad museums we've ever visited, the Conneaut Railroad Museum. Housed in the 99-year-old Lakeshore Depot, the museum's pride and joy is Nickel Plate 755, a stuffed and mounted S2 Berkshire steam engine built in 1944 by the Lima Locomotive Works. Although the preserved Berk sits next to the old New York Central main, it's not far from home. Nickel Plate's Conneaut shops opened with the railroad's inception and included a 22-stall roundhouse, a turntable, and the nearby yard. It was Nickel Plate's main back shop, augmented by smaller shops in Indiana and Ohio. Always cramped for space, the shops were added to over the years as locomotives got larger. After World War II, 6 roundhouse stalls were converted for diesel maintenance, and a fueling station was added in 1947. Today, a lone structure survives from the jumble of buildings that made up Conneaut shops. Gone are the car shops known for rebuilding cabooses and painting them in Nickel Plate's high-speed service paint scheme. Gone, too, are the steam engines that once called here, including the 80 Berkshires built for Nickel Plate between 1934 and 1949. Despite the changes, Conneaut still bustles as an NS crew change point. The railroad also keeps a pair of 4-motor EMDs in town for yard switching and local service. The Bessemer and Lake Erie Railroad is the antithesis of the old nickel plate. The latter was a bridge carrier that relied on fast, dependable freight service, a mission upheld by successor Norfolk Southern. The Bessemer, on the other hand, exists for one thing: haul coal, iron ore, and limestone between Butler, Pennsylvania, and Conneaut. Operations in Conneaut center on the Pittsburgh and Conneaut Dock Company. Built in 1892 as an ore dock, it began handling coal 5 years later. The dock handles 7.2 million tons of coal per year, which translates to 10,000 tons per hour moving over 20 miles of conveyor belts. A subsidiary of the Bessemer, the P&C dock operates with BNLE diesels, such as this EMD SD9. A former Bessemer F7B unit is also on hand. Once upon a time, the task of handling iron ore at Conneaut fell to 13 steam-powered Hewlett unloaders. Built in 1904, the Hewletts were used for 60 years. During that time, they handled a total of 589 million tons of ore, reaching peak production in 1953. At one time, there were 77 Hewletts in Great Lakes ports, 14 of them in Cleveland. The 4 remaining specimens stand on Whiskey Island, the other side of the Conrail lift bridge at CP 182. On a visit to Cleveland in 1992, we stood on a nearby fishing pier and watched pleasure boats sailing in and out of a nearby marina. Then we turned to see a group of 80-year-old mechanical dinosaurs that seemed to be feeding off a Canadian Laker boat. The CNP dock the Hewletts call home is leased by Conrail to the Hannah Mining Company. Placed in service in 1912, the Hewletts revolutionized the unloading process by unloading a ship in 13 hours. Earlier, the same task had taken nearly a week. In their years of service, it's estimated they unloaded some 100 million tons of material. Hannah Mining used the Hewletts to unload iron ore from upper Michigan and northern Quebec. The machines were invented by a young engineer named George Hewlett in the mid-1890s. Hewlett claimed a grasshopper inspired the idea for the unloaders, not surprising when you watch them at work. The CNP's Hewletts consist of 4 walking beams, those huge things that look like dinosaur necks. The beams are mounted on trolleys with a movable base that allows the Hewletts to move up and down the dock to gain access to the hold of the boat. The Hewlett operator sits in a tiny cab inside the vertical steel leg. At the end of the leg is a bucket that can pick up 17 tons of ore. The operator dumps the ore into a lorry car at the base of the walking beams. An operator in the lorry car weighs the ore and transfers it to Conrail-owned railroad cars. Narrow-gauge electric shunts shuttle along the Conrail tracks and use 2 arms to spot the ore cars for unloading. Conrail then hauls the ore south to Weirton Steel Corporation in Weirton, West Virginia, or the Wheeling Pittsburgh Steel Corporation in Steubenville, Ohio. Most of the ore boats on the lakes are self-unloaders that use conveyor belts to unload their cargo. But in 1992, a handful of older boats still unloaded manually. During our visit in October 1992, CNP Superintendent Ron Zimmer took us for a ride on the Hewletts. Hanging on for dear life at the top of one of the Hewlett legs, we pondered a story Ron Zimmer had told us earlier about a notable Hewlett accident.
Once one leg went berserk. The electrical wiring shorted out, and the leg went up and down, and the fellow, the operator, didn't have any control over it. And there was a tractor hanging on it, and went up and down, would smash the tractor every time it come down. Then it rotated on its own and came up through the hatch sideways and tore the whole deck of the boat off. Ripped it open, looked like a can opener, tore it open. But it didn't do any damage to the leg hardly at all at that time. Just tore the boat apart.
The Hewletts unloaded 27,000 tons of ore during our visit. Then, at the end of the 1992 Great Lakes shipping season, the Hewletts were shut down for good. Today, only self-unloader boats call it Whiskey Island. Ron Zimmer spent much of his career working on George Hewlett's invention. Even in 1992, Ron had a soft spot for the Titanic machines that served on Whiskey Island.
Maybe as time goes by, you'll think back of the good old days or something, you know, but probably won't miss them. Like myself, I came down there, and, like I said, at 55, when I was 18, I spent my whole life down there, you know. So I would imagine you'll probably miss them.
Near Girard, Pennsylvania, Norfolk Southern's Cleveland district peels away to reach the B&LE interchange at Wallace Junction. On the right is the B&LE turn from Greenville, Pennsylvania. On the left is the Conneaut switch job, which has just arrived to pick up the Bessemer interchange. It's headed back to the west end of the yard after attaching an end-of-train device to the east end of the train. Moments later, the B&LE heads west on its own tracks. Leading the way is an EMD SD38-2, the six-motor version of the GP38-2s on the NS switch job. Behind the lead unit is a low-nose SD18. Back on the NS, the local backs east on top of its train. Blue paint gives away the heritage of the coke cars as former Rock Island. Moments later, the switch job rolls west out of town, headed back to Conneaut. For us, the rolling stock is exotic and colorful. But to the two railroads that interchange at Wallace Junction, it's all in a day's work. Erie, Pennsylvania was incorporated as a borough in 1805 and as a city in 1851. Like the New York Central Depot in South Bend, Indiana, developers plan to rehabilitate Erie Union Station for retail and restaurant use. The Erie City Fathers would have been proud back in 1851. That's when the city passed a law requiring railroads from Erie to the New York border to be either standard gauge or 6-foot gauge. Not to be consistent, the city declared railroads to the Ohio border to be 4-foot 10-inch gauge. The reason for the law? To encourage commerce while changing trains in Erie. After all, if there were going to be people who had time between trains to eat a meal or even stay overnight, better they do it in Erie instead of riding straight through and spending good money in the restaurants of Dunkirk or the hotels of Ashtabula. The Conrail trains that roll through the station operate on one gauge, of course. In April 1853, Erie repealed its gauge law, and the city's two railroads agreed to re-gauge. However, various groups in Erie protested the change and tore up pieces of the railroad through town. It took 2 or 3 years before things settled down and Erie could boast of a through railroad. Even without the excuse of changing trains, it's worth stopping in Erie to eat at one of the city's unique diners. As you can see by the sign at Russ's Diner, it's diners with an O, not the traditional E. No one is sure how the misspelling came to be commonplace, but it's unique to Erie, Pennsylvania. The Lawrence Park Diner is a Silk City diner design built by the Patterson Vehicle Company in 1947. More than just good, simple food, the Erie diners offer a unique dining experience, right down to its server.
Royal cookie is excellent.
You must be on commission.
No, I wish I was, because I really push it.
Another thing in Erie worth chewing on is Norfolk Southern's operation down the middle of West 19th Street. Mind you, this is no branch line or industrial spur. The 2-mile stretch of railroad that runs down the middle of West 19th is part of Norfolk Southern's Cleveland District. Initially, the Erie City Fathers gave a thumbs down to Nickel Plate's plans to operate through town. So the railroad built the line on Sunday when the courts were closed and no injunction would be obtained to deny the construction. There's no chance of sneaking through town today. NS freights move at a cautious 10 miles per hour, sharing the street with vehicular traffic. To further enhance safety, the railroad employs several watchmen along the route. By the year 2000, NS will be gone from West 19th Street. With the breakup of Conrail, NS secured permission to build a new route parallel to CSX's former Conrail main through town. Like the law that once required travelers to change trains in Erie, Norfolk Southern's street running will soon be a thing of the past. For anyone steeped in railroad history, Erie, Pennsylvania is synonymous with General Electric. GE had long been a supplier of electric traction equipment to U.S. railroads. A month after the company's inception in 1892, the Baltimore and Ohio contracted with GE to supply the electrical installations and equipment to haul trains through a 1.5-mile-long tunnel on a new belt line in Baltimore. GE's first internal combustion locomotive was a 300-horsepower oil-electric known by its construction number 8835. Powered by an Ingersoll-Rand 6-cylinder inline engine, the humble 8835 marked the first significant application of diesel-electric power on U.S. railroads. Somewhere, a steam engine shuddered. The success of the 8835 led to a consortium between GE, Ingersoll-Rand, and American Locomotive, known as ALCO. The team built 35 600-horsepower box cab diesels between 1925 and 1931, including Central New Jersey No. 1000, generally regarded as the world's first commercially successful diesel-electric locomotive. While continuing its industrial-sized locomotive production, GE in 1940 formed a closer relationship with ALCO for large road locomotives. The two firms joined their sales forces and jointly began marketing a line of ALCO GE locomotives, including those early FA cab unit demonstrators. A softening in GE's commitment to the future of the straight electric locomotive appeared in 1954. That's when a rolling laboratory of 4 covered wagon-type diesel-electric locomotives began extended testing on the Erie Railroad. Powered by Cooper-Bessemer diesels, GE was ostensibly developing new universal road units for the export market. But there was more to the Universal series than the 400 or so units that sailed off to customers in Turkey, South Africa, and Argentina. In 1960, GE unveiled the U-25B, a 2,500 horsepower road switcher with a number of significant design improvements. GE 751 started life as export test bed number XP241, then switched numbers when it debuted as a domestic U-25B. A second set of demonstrators built between 1961 and 1962 consisted of conventional U-25s, 3 high-nose units, and low-nose 2501. The U-Series allowed GE to capture the number 2 market spot from ALCO within 3 years. In 1983, GE production outstripped electromotive successor EMD for the first time. To anyone steeped in the history of railroad transportation, General Electric is synonymous with Erie. When GE's early plants at Schenectady, New York, and Lynn, Massachusetts reached capacity around 1907, GE purchased 700 acres in Erie. 4 years later, most work was transferred to the Erie Works, which remains the center of GE's locomotive building business. How do you build a modern locomotive? For GE, the process begins with a locomotive frame assembled in Building 5. At this point, it contains little else but a fuel tank, some electrical cables, and an anonymous order number. Perched on shop trucks, the platform awaits its turn at Building 10, known as Locomotive Assembly. There are some 13,000 parts in a Dash 9 locomotive. With the exception of a few accessories, they're all brought together in Building 10. The 307,000 square foot erecting shop is at the heart of GE's Erie complex. Station 3 is where most of the assembly process takes place. Here, workers set, bolt, and weld components and sub-assemblies into place. Building a new locomotive takes from 21 to 25 days, a schedule Erie's 5,500 workers are understandably proud of.
Here in Erie, what we do at headquarters here is we produce diesel-electric locomotives. Again, we said that we're going to produce somewhere around 800 this year, so we track that daily. We ship to a tight schedule. We are focused on our customer here, so our two biggest priorities are reliability, or the quality of the locomotive going out, as well as hitting the customer's time requirements. And we really believe that that's what we focus on here with a lot of good people working towards those ends. Things that we've been working on is reliability, obviously is extremely important to the railroads, especially mission reliability, as well as on-time delivery. And when we talk about this factory here and meeting their commitments, they've done an excellent job of meeting their commitments to customers, and that means a lot, especially whenever we're in times now where there's a boom in the market, and that boom creates a need for power and a lack of power. When UP and when BNSF have that the problems with their service, they rely on that power being there, and it better be delivered on time.
As a safety measure, all handrails and safety chains must be in place before any top deck work is carried out. Once it's done, however, the transition from empty platform to locomotive happens quickly. One of the first operating assemblies to be set and welded in place is the main cab, which consists of the complete operating cab and nose. Appliances such as the traction motor blowers, air compressor, and lube oil cooler are installed. Then the rad cab, which comprises the engine radiators and rear hood section of the locomotive, is attached. The heart of the locomotive is the 7 FDL-16 engine and GMG 197 alternator. Once they've been installed, the remaining work is completed in short order. Earlier, the crane operator in the overhead crane spotted two rollerblade 6-motor trucks at a strategic position at Station 4. Now it's time to pick up the C-44 and place it on those trucks. To quote Trains author Greg McDonald, locomotives aren't meant to fly. Nonetheless, the crane operator deftly lowers the big C-44 to a soft, silent union with its trucks. Without so much as a bump, the 200-ton behemoth touches down. The next stop is the paint booths next door. Here, new units are sanded, masked, taped, painted, and lettered. The Bobcat hostels the completed unit into daylight for the first time. A brief ride on a transfer table delivers it to an open bay in Building 26. In Station 5, crews complete the installation of computer equipment and display screens in the cab console. Cab seats, number boards, and a host of other appliances are installed. Building 26 is also the home of Locomotive Test and Ship. Here, each locomotive gets a comprehensive system-level function test that requires nearly 650 operator verifications, sign-offs, and quality checks. Unique among locomotive builders, GE has its own 4.5-mile test track. It extends east from the plant and parallels the Conrail and NS main lines to Harbor Creek. In fact, it's entirely possible to see Chicago line traffic and GE test locomotives within minutes of each other. A ride in the cab of GE B39-8 809 reveals multi-gauge track and overhead electric catenary, a legacy of GE's long history building diesel and electric locomotives for customers worldwide. GE's policy is to have every locomotive undergo a minimum 100-hour shakedown on the test track. The company prefers to operate sets of 4 units with the 2 lead units pulling and the 2 trailing units in dynamic braking to simulate the load of a train. The regimen includes 4 miles in every notch from 1 to 7, then 8 miles in run 8. Performance data is recorded and collected and any defects noted and corrected. Despite its appearance, GE 809 isn't a lease unit or a demonstrator. It's assigned with 11 other units to GE's Building 60 Systems Engineering Test Facility. Located in a small shop near the test track in the southeast corner of the Erie complex, Building 60 is home to a small but dedicated group of workers whose job it is to test everything from components to entire locomotives. Much of the work is done with the 12 assigned test units, but customer locomotives, such as this GE AC 4400, are tested too. The test units aren't all GEs either. Among the units employed as load units on the test track are a pair of former British Columbia Railway M630s of Alco design. Acquired as trade-ins on BCR's Dash 8s, GECX 5000 was the prototype for a Super 7 rebuild program aimed at Mexican Alcos. Other units include the first GE AC traction diesel. Built at Building 60 as the 2000, the historic unit has been renumbered 4400. GE 809 is one of the first 2 Dash 8 units built. Originally B36-8-606, the 809 was outfitted in 1988 with a prototype version of the new standard safety cab. Nicknamed the Green Machine, the 6000 is the original AC 6000. Extensive modifications have seen much of the solid green car body replaced by new sections painted primer gray. But mismatched paint can't hide the 6000's heritage. After all, beauty's only skin deep. Like every locomotive built here since 1911, the 6000 can be proud to be Erie built. Northeast Pennsylvania is home to another railroad museum, the Lakeshore Railway Historical Society. Housed in a restored former Lakeshore passenger station built in 1899, it's home to 2 notable GE products. New York Central 2500 is the railroad's first U-25B, a classic early model with a long, non-droop nose. It also has a single-piece windshield, later replaced by a 2-piece design. The other big GE is a former Chicago, South Shore, and South Bend Little Joe Electric. The straight electric takes its name from Russian leader Joseph Stalin. Built for export to Russia as a wide-gauge locomotive, it fell victim to Cold War politics. GE resold 3 to the South Shore as standard gauge units. When you live in the moment, history is what happened a second ago. If that's true, then history came alive for us a few hundred yards west of the museum. Like a lighthouse, the abandoned Conrail interlocking tower between the NS and Conrail mains guided us to an afternoon of great train watching. In 1851, Dunkirk welcomed its first railroad, the New York and Erie, an Erie Railroad predecessor. Today, the line is gone, little more than a footnote in Dunkirk's history. You can see the remnants of another Dunkirk railroad in nearby Brockton, New York. The curve in the Norfolk Southern Main Line once accommodated the Pennsylvania Railroad's Chautauqua branch. Chartered in 1865, the line left McClintock, Pennsylvania, and traveled in a northerly direction to Brockton. There, it paralleled the Nickel Plate through Dunkirk all the way to Buffalo. After the 1968 Penn Central merger, the line was abandoned, leaving behind little more than this chunk of rusted rail. The two GP38-2s assigned to Dunkirk served the remnants of another branch line. A former central line known locally as the DAV, the Valley branch was originally operated as the Dunkirk, Allegheny Valley, and Pittsburgh. Although it escaped the fate of the Pensie's Chautauqua branch, the DAV operates a mere 5 miles to Fredonia, New York. Time has slimmed the Central's original 4-track main line through Dunkirk, but this massive signal bridge remains, a testament to Central's dominance. Another remnant of Central's past is this brick interlocking tower. Like its counterpart in Northeast, it's a relic of a bygone era, a mute spectator to the trains that continue to rumble through Dunkirk. For producer Paul Schneider, Silver Creek is a hallowed name. It may not look like much today, but when Schneider was a teen growing up in Burlington, Ontario, Silver Creek was the promised land. Older rail fans carried back stories of the Silver Creek Depot platform, a grandstand seat to take in the exotic diesels of Penn Central and Norfolk and Western, as well as pool power from Never Never Land railroads like Union Pacific and the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy. Over time, the Silver Creek Depot followed the Penn Central and Norfolk and Western into railroad history. But that didn't stop Schneider from feeling that he'd found the Holy Grail when he arrived on sacred ground for a few hours of train watching. Schneider isn't the only person drawn to railroading outside of big cities. Local fans are quick to point out the charm of train watching between Dunkirk and Buffalo.
Well, the reason that I spend most of my train watching time out on the lines west of Buffalo is that that's where I grew up. When I was a youngster, I was only a year old. My dad took me up to the old depot in Angola, New York, in a buggy to watch the steam locomotives go through Angola on the old New York Central Railroad. In fact, we could sit on my grandmother's porch and look down Main Street and see the engines going through the grade crossing. So it's like going home to come out here. You're out in the country. There's not a lot of traffic. There's a lot of good places to stop and park by the tracks and watch trains in relative comfort and safety. There's a lot of action out this way, especially where the two lines are real close together. You hardly ever have to wait more than maybe half hour, 45 minutes, you'll see a train. So there's plenty to watch, and it's just a pleasant thing to do, pleasant place to go. Trains are always interesting, and even today, you see these long unit trains of auto racks and coal porters, things like that. It's different, but it's still a train. It's still interesting. It's still an iron wheel on a rail going somewhere, from somewhere.
East of Silver Creek, you find yourself in grape country. Vineyards and rolling hills bring to mind California's Napa Valley wine-growing region. It's a far cry from Cleveland's Flats, or NS running down the middle of West 19th Street in Erie. But then again, that's the point.
You don't have to get very far out of Buffalo to get into what they call the grape belt. It really starts just west of Angola, which is roughly, say, 25 miles from Buffalo. From there, all the way down to Erie, Pennsylvania, along the lake shore is what they call a grape belt, where they grow a lot of Concord grapes and some other varieties as well. The Welch Grape Juice Company was founded in Westfield, New York, and it's still there. And there is a lot of little, I guess you call them micro wineries that have sprung up, scattered around here. Wine tasting tours are very popular now. And it's the soil, I guess, is just very good for grapes. It's not good for much of anything else. There's no real dairy farming or truck farming around here. It's basically vineyards.
Buffalo reminded us how easy it is to get sidetracked. When you face a deadline, the house suddenly needs to be cleaned. And then there's that rerun of MASH you really enjoy, the same episode you've seen 88 times before. That's what happened to us on the outskirts of Buffalo. The abandoned Central Terminal building called us like a siren song, inviting us to check out the city's urban railroading. Instead, we found ourselves in the western suburb of Blaisdell. In the distance, an abandoned Lackawanna Railroad bridge looked west to GB Interlocking, the spot where the nickel plate and Pensy crossed the Erie line to Jamestown, New York. Buffalo Southern operates 31 miles of the old Erie line between Gowanda, New York, and Buffalo Creek Junction in Buffalo. The company also performs contract switching for ConAgra in Buffalo and Dunlop Tire in suburban Tonawanda. Today's power is a former Delaware and Hudson Alco RS-11 or RS-36, depending on whose roster you believe. A few hundred yards to the north, the same abandoned Lackawanna Bridge spans the Chicago line. You wouldn't know it from the speed of this eastbound train, but we're near the west end of Conrail's Seneca Yard. Seneca Yard functions as an interchange with another Buffalo area short line, the South Buffalo. The Helm leasing EMDs on this train are a far cry from the railroad's beginnings in 1901. Owned by Bethlehem Steel Corporation, it handles some 61,000 cars per year, including auto traffic to and from a nearby Ford Motor plant. Of course, the bulk of the action in Blaisdell belongs to Conrail. Perhaps the best thing about Blaisdell is its proximity to the Red Top hot dog stand on US 20 on the shore of Lake Erie. In business since the 1940s, the Red Top turns out a grilled hot dog that's like no other. Our advice? Pick up a couple of dogs and a milkshake and head back to the tracks. Like we said at the top of our show, it isn't often you find great food and great train watching in one place. Bon appetit!